Sure, vulnerability, to be more yourself is great, and to ultimately become authentic in your relationships with other people, great. But still, why? What's the end goal? Is it to be a nice, sociable, likable person, to be respected, to be loved by others? And so then I came to realize that actually it's not so much about being vulnerable, so to speak, but it's about being, or if we use the word vulnerable, it's about being vulnerable with the divine. I took a pause there, you see, because I'm also very wary of using a word like the divine or God or anything of that sort, because it has such a religious connotation. It's developed this over the years. There's a massive religiousness out there where people preach about things and they might not follow it themselves, and it might be false, or it might be something outworldly, or it might be a certain sect or a certain system or blah blah blah, right? I mean, we all have so much skepticism these days, and that's why most are simply either agnostic or atheists, because surely we have seen and constantly continue to see so much fraudulence and insincerity in this front that we lose all belief in anything of that note, anything of the possibility of anything being, of there being more to us. So that's just to explain why my hesitation in using the word divinity. But now to continue using the word divinity, because we need a reference point. And this is exactly my point, that there ought to be a reference point that is not human, in the sense that it's not about personal relationships with other people. Because if that's the meter by which you operate, by which you mark yourself, so to speak, you're bound to eternity of disappointment, because people will always disappoint you. One day they'll be nice, another day they won't be. It is not a sustainable and reliable source for living a truly meaningful and fulfilling life, because it's bound to be constantly full of disappointments. There needs to be a certain reference point that transcends the human, a certain point that is beyond mistakes, faults, errors, a certain principle that then ultimately also helps us to navigate through life with a quality of integrity that is not bribable and dependable on others, but that is a certain principle through which you move. And it's in this way that I'm referring to the divine, but there is ultimately a source that we all come from, that all life is created by, through which forms take birth, so on and so forth. Again, not to turn this into some form of a preaching thing about God or not God, but ultimately the higher our aspiration, the higher the principle, the higher this reference point that we refer to, the more nobler, in a true sense, becomes our action, our speech. We're not there to please others. We're not there to prove something. We're not there to gain something for ourselves. But we've got a higher principle that guides us. And that also in turn then turns out what frees us. Because the divine is free. It's not something that calculates. It doesn't decide, who's to get this or who's not to get that, who's good or bad. It doesn't have a sense of profiteering like we humans do. It doesn't have a sense of morality, again, like we humans do, that we've created in our religiousness. It's not like that. It's not bound. It's not imprisoned like we human beings are, slaves, and we're constantly enslaving others with our slavery because that's all we know. We've been raised in an environment where it's all about fulfilling your parents' expectations, your education, making enough money to survive, to make yourself worthy of, you know, being successful, and yeah, getting a family and a good job and so on and so forth. And this is all slavery because that's not really free. It's a lack-based mentality where we're trying to prove something to somebody. And that's not really who we are in our essence. It's not why we came here for. And it's not our deepest and highest dimension that is being expressed through this form of approaching life. So this reference point, our sincerity, is something that gives us access to a quality that transcends our human limitations, our human fears, our human worries. So then vulnerability, to come back to where I started, isn't about, you know, others sort of approving of you, thinking you're a good one, you're vulnerable. This is what I used to think before, years before. Now it's about the divine. Whatever that means to you. See, it's not about imposing a form of what the divine is or isn't. Each one of us fundamentally in our being knows what that is. It's not something you think with your mind. It's just like a feeling that you know. It's something that you came with, that you've carried with you your whole life. It's not something you think about, you define. It has no words. You can't label it into a word, box it in. It's just a feeling that we all carry with us, that was, is, and will be with us, that we go back to from where we come. And so the more we build a relationship with this divinity that might be unknown, the more we can then refine and perfect our being, because then there is a certain synchronization that takes place, a certain purification from egoic tendencies, automatisms of fear and lack, possession. And there's a different principle that begins to emerge itself. So when this affinity and this connection is strengthened with the divine, then the pouring of it expresses itself through us. And in that there is a freedom, a power, a real power. And so it's in this way that I'd just like to elevate this topic of vulnerability. The higher dimension of it is sincerity. Sincerity with yourself and with building a connection with that which you come from. And building this relationship with that, again, not to define it, is where we truly come home, and where we find the fulfillment that we've so deeply yearned for our whole lives and been constantly disappointed in not being able to find in other people, in conversations, in work, and in everything. We find the truth that we've always been seeking. It's not somewhere out there, it's not in another person, but it's inside. And that gives us what we've always so deeply yearned for. If only we turn our seeking inwardly, and not for the sake of people, but for the sake of the divine.